The Journey of an Apprentice Pilgrim, Series Divine Footsteps. Book 1, written by Felipe Chavarro Polania, narrated by Louise Robinson, Brian Wilson, Christine Stevens, Otoniel Lewis, Marcus Burton, Luke Harris, Martin Payne, Michael Owen, Maxie Holmes. Kadmiel's Great Confrontation. True to his word, Kadmiel diligently guarded his grandfather's teachings, patiently awaiting the time to put them into practice. Each day, he would rise at the first sound of birdsong to search the chest and carefully memorize the scroll. However, at his age, the design contained in the parchment was difficult to apply, so much so that Kadmiel forgot it as time went by. In this way, his interest in the chest and the scroll waned until it disappeared. The years passed, and Kadmiel grew older and older until he reached the stage of his youth. Without realizing it, Kadmiel allowed the emotions of his youth to cause him to forget his grandfather and the treasures he had so solicitously entrusted to him. One fine summer day, as usual, after a day of feasting, Kadmiel got up at noon. Wanting to go out to continue the party, he hurried to find something to wear in his wardrobe. Suddenly, his grandfather's chest suddenly fell, and as it clattered open, Kadmiel, peering into the small chest, could see the parchment slipping slightly out of the lid. Then, bending down to the ground, he carefully lifted the chest and the scroll that had slipped out. Rising to his feet, he took a few steps towards the barred window of his room, through which came the sounds of the bustle from the festivities taking place nearly half a stadium away. As he turned his eyes back to the chest, he was overcome by memories of his grandfather and nostalgia at not being able to hear his voice again. So, he resolved to read the scroll again, and unrolling it, he began to read it as he had not done for some time. Suddenly, a great frustration came over him as he realized how foolish he had been to think that a simple young man like him could cope with the task his grandfather had given him. At that moment, in frustration, he said to himself,
I have become what I was afraid of as a child, and my emotions and arrogance have betrayed me. I have become accustomed to doing what is not right, so that I have not lived according to my thinking, and therefore I have ended up forgetting my grandfather and his advice. Why should knowledge and wisdom corner a young man who does not know his destiny? For what I ought to do, I do not do. And ignoring my grandfather's advice, I have surrounded myself with company that is of no use to me.
He had not yet finished talking to himself, when suddenly the sound of a stone on his window interrupted him. Looking out, he could see his friend Azai beckoning him to open his window. As he opened it, Azai shouted,
Go on, rejoice! Be satisfied, the feast is not yet over. Come out as soon as possible, for many are waiting for us to taste all kinds of wine.
So saying, Kadmiel, without thinking, put the parchment in the chest, and closing the lid, laid it on his bed and hastened out. As he went out, in order to show himself indulgent, Kadmiel said to himself,
If both the wise and the foolish succumb, what is all my effort worth? So why should I strive to solve my grandfather's plan? I shall then depart from the days full of sorrow and pain, and restless and bitter nights that afflict only those who diligently seek to be wiser.
So Kadmiel resolved to taste the pleasures of drunkenness, and thereby numb the voice that called within him. Gradually, Kadmiel lost the innocence that characterized him, and unsuspectedly, he gave way to the vice of drunkenness, which his grandfather had admonished him against. Without realizing it, both wine and partying were his constant, so that he often staggered home because of his drunkenness. One day after a party, Kadmiel arrived home drunk, so drunk that he could not stand up. So his mother and grandmother, seeing him with astonishment, had to help him to his room. Once he had reached it, he groped his way to the wall, and throwing himself on his cot, he talked himself to sleep.
Can the zebra change the color of his spots, or the wild creature become tame? How can my dear child escape from this nature that threatens to thwart his future? Like his father and grandfather, he has become accustomed to the same way of life. And like them, he is unable to begin to be a sober man.
His grandmother Batya, nodding her head in dissent, said,
Do not worry, my dear daughter, for Kadmiel will soon find the answer in the hands of his maker. For though his hands are weak and helpless before this strong enemy that afflicts him, groping or blindly in his darkness. His hands will touch the right hand of his Maker and be lifted up and strengthened.
Seema nodded her head slightly.
So be it, I almost lost my patience.
At that very moment, his grandmother turned her face towards Kadmiel's room and caught sight of her grandson, who was watching them behind the door. Then she immediately beckoned him to come closer, and he sat down carefully in a chair, waiting for his grandmother to speak to him.
My son, you have already wasted many days, so it is time to re-examine your dreams and ambitions. Do you still wish to become an apprentice and fulfill your grandfather's design?
Yes, madam, indeed I do. But when I require willpower, I feel it fizzles out. And as the scroll says, I always end up doing what I don't want to do.
Bhatia, nodding, said,
Remember that as the most powerful forces in nature are invisible, so the most powerful forces in man cannot be seen.
And what are these forces?
His grandmother replied.
They are his will and his thoughts. Whoever controls these forces has the power to shape his destiny and anticipate success in his career. Heat is invisible, but it can melt iron with ease.
Kadmiel shook his head and said,
How can I achieve such a thing? Can I control my thoughts and will?
I will explain it to you. I have lived for many years, and I have only seen such a capacity in those who have had an encounter with their Maker, for they are fortunate enough to hear his voice and instruction.
Then Kadmiel interrupted and said,
How can I find my Maker?
His grandmother paused and then continued.
The determination to seek him, no matter what obstacles come your way, is perhaps the most important skill in finding him. If you surround yourself with those who seek him with sincerity and resolution of heart, he will come to meet you. Why should you walk like other young people, who allow their emotions to lead them to forget their Creator? Remember him while you are young, lest when you grow old you have no strength to fulfill his purposes. Why should man seek his Creator when he has no strength? Why should man seek his Creator when his life is already marked by the mistakes and scars of yesterday? No, my son, seek him now when you have strength, so that from his mouth you may gain wisdom and knowledge, that you may live a life full of true joy.
With that, the words ceased and silence reigned throughout the house. Kadmiel didn't look up as he gathered his thoughts. Kadmiel overcame the impulse to stand up and run off with his friends as usual, and then he felt his grandmother's hand on his shoulders, and with prevention he raised his eyes and fixed them on his grandmother's face.
My son, I see clearly that you are in doubt as to how to begin your search. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Go back to your grandfather's teaching, which, by the way, is simple.
How can I become a child again being grown up?
His grandmother, staring at him, said,
As a child, don't reason so much when a new teaching or distinction comes to your mind. Just be moldable and connect to each teaching with humility and imagination. When you were a child, it was easy for you to follow your grandfather's designs, opening your mind to each teaching, for you used your imagination to assimilate it. Now you use your reason. Remember that reason is based on your senses, which do not distinguish the unseen powers, nor could they perceive them.
Second flash of wisdom. The young man nodded and was about to speak, but Bhatia raised her hand as a sign to continue listening and continued.
Your grandfather's designs were very simple to follow when you were but a boy. However, now that you have grown up, your reason has become the foundation of all your beliefs. So now his designs have become very heavy, and it is difficult for you to follow them again.
That's right, I'm finally getting it,
interrupted Kadmiel.
Therefore, my son, lay hold of humility and imagination, for these are the seeds the Creator planted in every human being, that we may find him, if we so determine. But if you let your path be ruled by your senses, reason will reign in your mind, and sooner or later arrogance will undermine your destiny. Remember therefore from whence thou hast fallen, and return to being as a child. Only then can you know the Creator of all things. He himself will plant within your being the seed of desire, so that you nurture it with a clear imagination, and water it with a sincere faith. For he himself who planted it will perfect your desire to its manifestation. Stay away therefore from youthful passions, which will temper the innocence that leads you from the heart to your Maker. If you do so, you will be able to master your will and your thoughts. In this way, you will be able to overcome your nature, surrendering your body to be governed by your mind, your mind to be governed by your soul to be governed by your spirit, which you will surrender to the guidance of your Maker. Thus shall you attain to true greatness, which is but a spiritual condition. Become like a child, which flows naturally in its imagination and faith.
For a moment his grandmother paused, and looking at him steadily, she gave him a sigh and asked,
Do you want to know where to find the purest image of the invisible God, my dear son?
Of course I do!
If, in the course of your search, your strength should weaken and you should feel that you have not been able to see clearly the face of your Creator, always remember, my son, to take a moment to speak to a child.
With a child?
Yes, children are the greatest glimpses of the light of your Maker. God must be incomprehensible to reason, as the child is incomprehensible to the arrogant mind. And here I will give you some reasons. The Creator is all-knowing, and such is his wisdom, that his radiance must enlighten the mind of one who is like a child, who rarely objects or subjects new teachings to the darkness of reasoning. Every child is full of curiosity. Be like a child. The Creator is immeasurable, and such is his immensity that he dwells only in those who are like children. Only he who is aware of his littleness will have unlimited space within himself for his Maker to dwell within him. Be like a child. For the Creator of the universe, there are no impossibilities, and his power and favor are to be the property of those who are like children. Only he who has faith and imagination as the main foundations of his mind will have the architect and founder of the universe in his favor. Be like a child. The Most High only finds its habitation in those who are like children. A child is humble enough to ask, humble enough to take with gratitude, innocent enough to set no limits to its inventor. So, to be like a child is to display that much maligned virtue, which is an unquestioning faith in the existence of an unreservedly giving parent. Be like a child, to be an apprentice, to accept the exhortation of your counselors, and to be able to find your Maker. You must be like a child. Only then will you be able to fulfill your grandfather's design. Be like a child.
Kadmiel closed his eyes and sighed. Then, in a serene voice, he said to his grandmother,
Today I can understand more clearly that my only chance to achieve my grandfather's plan is to return to the ancient paths. Only by returning to the origin can I become aware of the depth of the path to be trodden. Today I am determined to be like a child, abounding in humility, devoid of prejudice and reasoning.
Well said, my son.
Having said this, his grandmother said to him,
Tomorrow at this time you will speak to your uncle Raphael, for he's taken the reins of your grandfather's business and has prospered greatly. He and your mother will by common consent arrange for you to begin your studies.
At that moment, his mother Seema interrupted, saying,
My son, to leave the path by which you were lost, you must occupy your time, replacing recreation with learning. The key is a simple replacement, my dear son. You must replace exaggerated entertainment with substantial training. Only then will you achieve what you hope for. If you want to be a learner, you must perceive your ignorance. Only the foolish are lost in idleness. And if you were to talk to all of them, you would surely find that they are all wise in their own opinion. Therefore, they need not learn. But you, my dear son, you must understand that humility must establish your capacity to learn. Your capacity to learn will set your capacity to improve, and your capacity to improve will set the limits of your capacity to change. This is the philosophy of a true learner. You cannot be a true learner if you are satiated with knowledge and puffed up with your arrogance. Only an apprentice is humble enough to learn more. Substitute continuous training for mindless entertainment.
With that said, his mother and grandmother stood up and walked away, while Kadmiel stood there, holding his gaze towards them, absorbed in thought. Kadmiel starts his training. The hours passed, and Kadmiel went to rest, thinking about what his grandmother and mother had told him. When he awoke, it was morning, and after a few moments of painful indecision, the apprentice hurried to get ready to leave to meet his uncle Raphael. When he had left his house, he carefully untied the knots of his steed. Instantly, he hurriedly led his steed down the path that led to the main road to the place where he would meet his uncle. Kadmiel, riding swiftly with his head lowered so that he could attain greater speed.
What will I study? My uncle will be disappointed when he learns that I am not clear about what I am to do with my life.
He pondered to see if he could come up with an idea so as not to make a fool of himself in front of his uncle Raphael. Perhaps he could get an idea of his profession on the road ahead. Would his uncle believe him if he took a profession at random? This was possible if he chose a profession that his uncle did not master at all. Enraptured in thought, he suddenly found himself on the road leading to the oil fields, near the settlement where his uncle had his caravans. He alighted from his steed and walked heavily in front of his mount until he came to the main caravan. A blazing sun shone in his face, and the encounter that had frightened him all the way came immediately as he saw his uncle Raphael outside the main tent, looking intently at the spot from which Kadmiel was approaching. Raphael immediately approached the young man and welcomed him. Then they both sat down, and his uncle asked him,
"Have you come to talk over what your grandmother and your mother told me?"
Yes, sir. I have come for the purpose of receiving direction to increase my chances of success in life. Though if I am as lucky as you have been, I surely will be.
Raphael frowned and said,
"I suggest that you refrain from giving prominence to luck forever. Anyone who would give luck relevance in his path must be incapable of understanding the cause of his success. The creator of all things does not play dice."
Kadmiel's joy was immediately stilled when he asked,
Will you show me the path I must choose to succeed?
"Did you bring your goals and desires with you on parchment?"
Raphael asked.
No, sir, I do not yet know clearly what I want in life.
Then no one can help you, my boy. Now I understand why you have come to me with luck as your banner.
What can I do then to begin my journey successfully?
Kadmiel asked, full of doubts and questions.
You must act without delay. You must dare to believe that within you there is something greater than your doubts and fears. The greatest success you can imagine must be an accumulation of small decisions made in the face of fear. Don't give way to paralysis. The act of daring must always be the best decision you can make. Winners in any field were once like you. Those whom men exalt today were once groping in fear and doubt. All without exception wandered through life thinking that luck and chance were the determinants of success. Until one fine day, they found the truth, daring to forge their destiny with their decisions.
Kadmiel was silent, and Raphael continued.
First of all, you must understand that education and training are not the determinants of success, but they are a great help. Both instruct us by giving us the tools to perform a job for a living. What really determines a man's success, however, is the use he makes of the gift his maker planted within him.
The young man nodded and asked,
What is that gift?
Creative imagination.
Oh yes, now I understand what my grandmother taught me before we met. In that case, could we skip the studies?
Raphael frowned and nodded his head and continued.
Training and education will help you to build your dreams. This will only happen if you focus them on filling your mind with possibilities. For the knowledge of truth equals freedom itself. How will you know what the truth is if someone does not teach it to you? No matter how hard you work, if your thinking is steeped in the lie of fear of failure. In the end, its power will not only kill your efforts, but neutralize your dreams, making your success impossible to achieve.
Kadmiel hesitated and said,
I really don't know what to study or what career I should pursue.
Oh, that's another matter. Very well, my young apprentice, I will help you to begin your career as a field explorer. Perhaps, like your grandfather and me, you will find joy in this profession. If you fail, you will not waste your time. For to know what we want, we must first distinguish what we do not want in life. I am sure that this will be the right way for you to find your purpose in life. By recognizing your abilities and inclinations, you will be closer to your life project.
Kadmiel fell to his knees in great relief, and clinging to Raphael's tunic, he said,
Uncle, how can I thank you for your help?
Raphael turned away from Kadmiel and stared at him.
Before you thank me, get up and stand on your feet. In order for you to begin your study, I want you to understand clearly the three most important sources of knowledge.
What are they?
Kadmiel asked curiously.
Tomorrow morning you will report to Asael at the caravans where the clay is taken. He will give you, under your care, scrolls containing the most relevant knowledge of our profession. Study them carefully and see to it that you go daily to Asael, who will teach you what you need to know about the processes involved in processing the clay before it is transported on the caravans.
Kadmiel nodded, trying to hide his enthusiasm.
So the scrolls are a source from which I will gain wisdom.
Yes, but it is not only from these scrolls that wisdom is to come, but from any other scroll that comes to hand.
Kadmiel nodded again, waiting for his uncle to point out the other two sources of wisdom. However, his uncle stood up and said,
Take your steed and return home. Tomorrow begin to follow my instructions carefully, and in time I will show you the other two sources of wisdom.
At that instant, Raphael put his hand on Kadmiel's shoulder and continued,
If you suddenly discover that you do not have what it takes for this profession, do not faint. Only promise me that you will keep on trying until you succeed.
Kadmiel, staring at him, replied,
I will.
So saying, they parted. Kadmiel fails in his training. Kadmiel, on horseback, returned to his grandmother's house in order to prepare himself to begin his training the next day. That same night, he threw himself on his bed, and tired from such a strenuous day, he pondered until he fell asleep. The next morning when he awoke, he hurried to keep his appointment with Asael at the fields where his uncle had told him to go. He ran to the door of his house in order to saddle his horse and start his departure. Suddenly to meet him came his comrade Azai, dressed in smart clothes and with a wide smile on his face.
Where are you going so early, my friend?
Azai asked in a mocking tone. Kadmiel, with some hesitation, replied,
I'm going to the oil fields where my uncle works. For today I will begin my exploration training.
Azai, mocking Kadmiel, said,
Why should you start as a simple bricklayer? Look at me carefully. I neither work nor study, and yet I have plenty of bread, so that I eat my fill and dress splendidly. But you, my dear friend, have chosen the path of greater effort to achieve what has taken me only a few days. Why should you work and study for long hours? Ha ha ha! Rather follow me, and I will show you how easy it is to become immensely rich in a short time. Then you will have time enough like me to enjoy yourself, basking in the pleasures that effortless success brings.
Thus, Kadmiel began to waver between two thoughts, frequently missing the training his uncle had offered him at Asael's hand. As the days passed, and Kadmiel continued his friendship with Azai, he was often absent for long hours from his training with Asael. Asael appreciated Kadmiel, however, and waited patiently for the boy to come to his senses. When Kadmiel attended his training sessions with Asael, he willingly taught him about the trade, even though he knew that his lack of commitment would set him up for failure when he was assigned his first scout. One day, as was his custom, Kadmiel went in search of Azai before heading out to the oil fields. Arriving at the place where they often met, he could not find him. He then saddled his steed and set off for the fields to meet Asael. When he came to the meeting place, Asael went out to meet him, and without hesitation said to him,
Why have you set your eyes on riches gained without effort? Do not eat bread with the fool, nor covet his delicacies.
Frightened by Asael's tone of voice and by the harshness of his refrain, Kadmiel drew back and asked,
I do not understand what is the reason for this greeting.
Have you been able to find your friend Azai, whom you are accustomed to seek out before coming to your training?
No, sir.
Kadmiel passed his hand across his forehead and looked uncertainly at Asael.
I am so sorry for your loss, my dear Kadmiel. Your friend was found hanging from a tree in the night.
Kadmiel, dismayed, fixed his eyes on Asael and said,
But what has happened? I don't understand.
Asael looked compassionately at him and said,
Apparently the ruffians with whom he used to do business hanged him for not having fulfilled one of their demands.
Kadmiel, bending down to the floor, stared at the ground in utter desolation at the news. After a while, Asael laid his hand gently on Kadmiel's shoulder and said,
Do not grieve, boy. Regain your strength. We must hurry, for we are going to accompany his family and friends at this difficult and painful time.
So, Asael hurriedly saddled his donkey, and in the company of Kadmiel, they set off for the place where the funeral service was being held. On donkeyback, they entered the western gate of the mortuary, where Azai was being mourned. As they entered the place of mourning, only the sound of their shoes echoed in the gigantic chamber where the coffin lay. Seeing their parents and relatives in the background, Asael and Kadmiel slowed their pace somewhat and carefully approached those who were sobbing over Azai's death. After a while, the two withdrew from the mortuary and, having left the compound, walked in silence to the western gate where they had left their donkey. Suddenly, Asael drew a small rolled parchment from his sash and stretched out his hand and handed it to Kadmiel.
Why do you give me this parchment?
Kadmiel asked in surprise. Asael leaned on Kadmiel's shoulder and said,
This scroll was given to me by one of my mentors on a day as painful as this. Since then, its wisdom has enabled me to profit from days like this. Keep its teachings in your heart and challenge it so that foolishness will never undermine your existence.
Is it possible to profit from such a day of mourning as this?
Interrupted Kadmiel.
When you read it and meditate on it, you will surely understand what I have said.
So saying, Kadmiel sighed and took the road back to his grandmother's house. Kadmiel walked slowly with his head lowered so that he did not even notice the road ahead of him. Lost in thought, he asked himself,
Why didn't I have the character and determination to persuade my friend to take the right path? And now that I must soon meet my uncle, what excuse will I use to justify my poor performance as Asael's apprentice?
He set about planning how he would present his defense, now that the day of reckoning with his uncle was at hand. Finally, he arrived at his grandmother's house, and hastening to his grandmother's house, he made his way upstairs to his room without anyone noticing his arrival. Entering his room, he took the small parchment from his belt and, unrolling it, began to read.
It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and he that liveth shall lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sorrow of countenance the heart shall be mended. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the foolish is in the house of mirth.
At that moment, Kadmiel leaned back on his bed and in complete serenity said to himself,
How much wisdom there is in this little proverb! Surely he who has written it must be very wise. I shall rejoice in this day of suffering, for the Creator of all things has granted me a new opportunity to mend my heart.
A heart that was full of mediocrity, excuses and reasonings, which were to keep me from the teaching of my loved ones. From this day forward, I shall enter the house of mourning, as one who has an appointment with his Maker to give an account of his pilgrimage. For no man is better than another, and the same event will befall the one as the other. Why am I still alive? Why am I here? What is the purpose for which I have been kept from death? Now I understand that it is not I who am seeking my Creator, but He Himself is seeking me. Who am I that my arrogance and foolishness should be overlooked? Today I stand in awe of my Maker's favors towards me, for I have been treated with great generosity in being sheltered from death. Today, as a token of my gratitude, I will do my best. Today I surrender my life to my Maker, that He may help me to proceed with wisdom within the time allotted to me. Today I determine to seek the answer from my Maker. Only then will Azai's death not be in vain. For like me, he was deprived of his life, and in his place I have been left. Today, mourning has mended my heart.
Kadmiel is reunited with his uncle. And so it came to pass that Kadmiel lay in his bed until he fell asleep. The next morning, he hurried to the place where he was to meet Asael again. Arriving at the fields, he immediately went to the place where Asael was. This time, Asael was with his uncle Raphael, discussing at length what had happened with Azai. When they both stood up, they beckoned him to come closer. Thus, the young Kadmiel very cautiously sat down at the edge of the table where they were conversing, waiting for one of them to start talking. Just after a brief silence, his uncle Raphael began to speak.
Kadmiel, I have been informed of your poor performance as an apprentice. In addition, Asael has also brought me up to date on the death of your comrade Azai. Have you thought about your poor performance as an apprentice? What has been the reason for your great failure?
Yes, sir. Indeed, I have not devoted the necessary time to fulfill my responsibilities as an apprentice.
And in a broken voice, Kadmiel said,
I have failed because of my mediocrity and indecision, and by this I have wasted your time.
Have you failed at all? I don't see it that way. Experience has not returned to you.
Raphael interrupted. In a voice that sounded like a stammer, so low that both Asael and Raphael had to lean forward to hear, Kadmiel recounted his encounters with Azai, the great wealth he possessed, and the way he lived his life. As the young man spoke, Asael and Raphael listened attentively. Suddenly the words ceased and there was silence in the tent where they stood. Kadmiel dared not look up, He had failed irresponsibly, proving by his mediocrity and behavior that he was not worthy of the opportunity he was being offered. Suddenly, he felt his uncle Raphael's hand on his shoulders, and with great apprehension, he raised his eyes, fixing them on him.
My dear nephew, although this time has brought me only losses, it has certainly been of great benefit to you.
That's right,
replied Kadmiel. Third flash of wisdom. Then Raphael, after taking a deep breath, began to speak.
Listen to me carefully, Kadmiel. You must learn that excuses will always be a dead end. If you choose to walk down it, you will lose any chance of progress. Remember that you have to be a good loser to learn how to win. So stop wavering between two thoughts if you want to take the path of the great ones. Be determined and take it with responsibility and commitment. But if you want to be ordinary, act with mediocrity. Therefore, take responsibility for your life as your first step as a leader. Act always expecting the best, always giving the best of yourself, and the best will always end up manifesting itself. I think now is the time for you to listen to the other two sources of wisdom. I will explain them to you, but first, I must make a request.
Yes, sir.
Are you willing to resume your training without delay until Asael determines that you are ready?
Kadmiel stood up resignedly and, bowing again to Raphael, said,
Whatever you demand of me, that I will do diligently. I want to succeed and not disappoint him.
Raphael nodded his head and began to say,
Some time ago I had taught you that the scrolls hold great wisdom.
That's right,
replied Kadmiel.
Very well. The second source of legitimate wisdom is uncomfortable experiences.
Uncomfortable experiences?
Again, Kadmiel interrupted curiously.
That's right. Uncomfortable experiences are treasured through failure and suffering. It is there that true growth occurs. For the greater the discomfort during learning, the greater the growth. As your grandfather often said, if you don't feel uncomfortable during the learning process, it's because you're not really learning anything new. You're in your comfort zone for sure. Can you see the challenge ahead?
Yes, sir. Every day I understand more and more the importance of being an apprentice.
Very good, Kadmiel. The third source of wisdom comes from people who have already achieved the success you are pursuing. This, without a doubt, is the most important source you can find, for it will save you time, energy, and effort as you move towards the fulfillment of your life project. Although you may not fully understand it, failed attempts and failures bring with them bruises and wounds, and without a competent mentor, they can lead to frustration. However, when painful and uncomfortable experiences are accompanied by a mentor, you will not only learn, but you will shed your old skin, which is tainted with old habits that lead to mediocrity and constant failure. Remember that true transformation is an essential sign of true learning. If you are continually changing, it is because you are continually learning. From this last process that I have indicated to you, my dear nephew, will emanate your results and, as a consequence, the portion of success that life will grant you.
Raphael then paused for a moment and asked Asael,
Asael, you have been my mentor all this time. Therefore, I value your opinion very much at this time. Would you share with Kadmiel and me a little of your wisdom and experience?
Then the old man nodded and said,
Of course I will. I appreciate Kadmiel as much as I appreciate you, my dear Raphael.
At that moment he turned his face to Kadmiel and said,
Kadmiel, I have seen your training at close quarters, and therefore I want you to listen carefully to what I have to say.
I will listen carefully, I promise.
Asael continued,
People are what they choose to do with their time. In your training I have been able to observe you closely, and I can tell that the reason you have failed is because you have not determined your dream in life. Because of this, you have easily given in between many thoughts. If you do not establish your dream in life, you will be carried around by all that others desire for you, subject to servitude to what others think or establish. Those who succeed are those who clearly define their life plan and then use all their strength and energy to achieve it. Your success in life will be determined by your ability to give your all. There is no substitute for your level of commitment. So, my dear son, choose a vocation as the foundation of your dream.
Kadmiel shook his head.
I don't understand you, sir.
Vocation is more important than profession, because vocation is a way of life that allows you to walk the path that leads you to your life project with due veracity and intensity, loving what you do, giving yourself unreservedly. For this reason, those who find their vocation have to cross the chasm that separates mediocrity from success. Your ability to commit yourself is that chasm, my dear Kadmiel.
Kadmiel's eyes filled with great emotion.
Then I must find my dream and my vocation. Only then will the training bear fruit.
The old man nodded his head and said,
Training serves to improve your self-concept so that you break through your limits. Commitment is the consequence of discovering your vocation, which is your purpose in life. Continuous training and obsession are its fruits. If you discover the source of these things, you will love what you do. You will be passionate about your vocation, and you will live in its arms. There is no better way to get a taste for life than this.
At that moment, Kadmiel thought for a few moments about his intervention, and then said,
Now I understand my grandfather's design. For to fulfill all this, I must become an apprentice, taking the advice of my mentors. However, upon reflection, I believe that the source of which you speak is my maker.
That's right, boy. Your grandfather's designs finally converge in the same doctrine. To find one's vocation is to meet one's maker, to grasp that for which we were also grasped by our maker.
Kadmiel interrupted, saying,
In that case, I want to know how I can talk to God.
The old man then looked at Kadmiel with pleasure and said,
Very well. Today at the end of the day I will give you a scroll that was entrusted to me by my mentor. Like the treasure your grandfather gave you, this scroll has been my great secret for many years. I have lived on the alert for a long time, waiting patiently for the sign of the person to whom I should give it. During my waiting, I applied every principle learned in this little writing, and I can say that thanks to this scroll, I was able to find the direction of my maker, even in the darkest days. Now that I have heard your story, and about your grandfather's chest that means so much to you, something inside my soul spoke to me and told me that my long time of waiting was over. I have finally found the one who was destined to receive this scroll. However, I would like to make a request before I give it to you.
Kadmiel, in an effort to hide his enthusiasm, said,
Yes, sir, whatever you demand, I will do diligently.
The old man sighed and said,
Kadmiel, always remember that wisdom is simplicity. Therefore you will know that your maker has spoken to you when the solution is so simple that even the clumsy one, however clumsy, will not be led astray. Bear in mind, too, that our maker must also speak through those around us, or through those who have succeeded in the path we wish to tread. Do not act irresponsibly, ignoring that those who are successful have often brought their teachings to the scroll. Therefore seek the teachings of those who have succeeded as one who seeks gold. And once you receive a scroll containing their wisdom and experience, listen attentively as you read.
Listen while I read?
Kadmiel interrupted.
Yes, when you read, you are to read by listening attentively to the voice of those who instruct you. And if possible, you are to paint in your mind the vivid image of the one who has opened the scroll of his life to be read by your eyes. Live as he who has written the scroll. Feel as its writer. Think as its maker. Study it solicitously.
Kadmiel raised his hand and said,
If I know someone of great success, but he has not written down his experience in a scroll, how can I drink from his wisdom?
The old man clapped his hands in a frenzy and said,
What a great question, my son. In that case, you must write him in your own handwriting.
Then Kadmiel, shaking his head, said,
How can I write to him if I am a stranger to the person I admire?
The old man, with a look that transcribed acceptance, said,
Successful people are generous with what they have learned. They are souls who in the past have wandered aimlessly, and that is why they will help the one who has decided to receive advice.
Unable to suppress his glee, Kadmiel smiled and tapped his fingers on the table. Asael reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a small scroll, and held it out to Kadmiel.
This is the scroll that changed my life. If you follow it as zealously as I did, you will find your purpose and calling, receiving direction from your Creator. Behold.
Kadmiel took the parchment in his hands, and opening his robe, he carefully put it away. The light in Asael's eyes ceased after a couple of seconds of silence. Then he continued,
If you find your Maker's guidance as I did, surely your life will no longer be an accident. You will continue on your upright path, living and breathing your calling. You will sleep confidently as one who has a mission, a reason to exist. Tomorrow, we will meet again to begin your training.
Kadmiel opens the scroll. At that moment, Kadmiel stood up and said goodbye to Asael and his uncle, and left the tent. Outside, he took his steed and rode home. When he arrived, he stopped, leaned his back against the door, took a deep breath, and gazed into the gloom of the night, pondering his thoughts. A new sensation enveloped him, and it was his sign that some things had changed inside him. Strangely, he didn't feel as distressed to be at home as he had the last few days. Kadmiel had a faint feeling that he was about to find a great answer to the questions that had plagued his mind for so long. At that moment, opening his robe, he pulled out the small scroll Asael had given him, and unrolling it, he began to read.
Behold, in this you have not spoken justly. I will answer you that God is greater than man. Why are you fighting against him? Because he does not account for any of his reasons. However, in one or two ways God speaks, but the man does not understand. For sleep in night vision, when sleep falls on men, when they doze on the bed, then he reveals to the ear of men, and he points them to his advice, to remove the man from his work, and put away pride from the man. It will stop his soul from the grave, and his life from perishing by the sword. He is also punished on his bed with severe pain in all his bones, that makes his life abhor bread, and his soul the soft food. Its flesh faints, so that it cannot be seen, and his bones, previously unseen, appear. His soul is approaching the grave, and his life to those who cause death. If I had near him some eloquent, hand-picked mediator, let it announce to man his duty. Let him tell him that God had mercy on him, who delivered him from going down to the grave, who found redemption. Its flesh will be more tender than that of the child. He will return to the days of his youth. He will pray to God, and God will love him, and you will see his face with joy, and he will restore to man his righteousness. He looks over men, and to him who says, I sinned and perverted what was right, and I have not benefited from it. God will redeem his soul so that he will not go to the grave, and his life will be seen in light. Behold, all these things God does 2 and 3 times with the man, to remove his soul from the grave and to illuminate it with the light of the living. Listen, my son, and hear me. Shut up, and I'll do the talking. If you have reasons, answer me. Speak, because I want to justify you. And if not, you listen to me. Be quiet, and I will teach you wisdom.
Reading these words, Kadmiel was shocked, for he felt that he himself had questioned the wisdom of his grandfather and his mentors. At that moment, he thought of Asael, realizing that if his friend had sought wisdom first, he would not have lost his life tragically. Then Kadmiel remembered his grandfather's voice, and in a loud voice began his dissertation.
I will memorize the scrolls that have been bestowed upon me by my mentors. Today I choose to prepare for the day when I will meet my Maker, guided by the wisdom of age and not by the vanity of an inexperienced youth. Today I have learned that the Creator of all things comes readily to every man who shows humility before his word. Only he who hears and trembles at his teaching shall be redeemed from his errors all the days of his life. Today I hold in my hands the foundation for hearing the voice of God. Thus shall my soul depart from pride, walking no more in the path filled with the gloom of those who rise up blind with presumption against their Creator. I have been enlightened with the light of the living. My life is not an accident, so that every event within it is part of a thought far higher than my own. In all that is left for me to live, I will not attribute to my Maker any folly. Today I choose the path of the wise, acting without fear of folly, understanding that success takes time, and therefore I must invest it in my personal development. My life is not an accident, so that every event within it is part of a thought far higher than my own. In all that is left for me to live, I will not attribute to my Maker any folly. Today I choose the path of the wise, acting without fear of folly, understanding that success takes time, and therefore I must invest it in my personal development. Today I will consider that effort and perseverance must replace my laziness and indecision in order to wear the crown of success. I will give myself wholly to my training, allowing the great goldsmith of time to cast his art in my soul, using his favorite tools of patience and silence. Who am I to object to the work of time, if even my Maker trusts it as his great goldsmith to cast his purpose and his art among the living? Time must cast its art upon me, with the same devotion as it did for the great ones of history. But this will only happen if I only keep silent and wait patiently. I will never proceed in haste. For every success has its time, and no living man, however hard he may strive, can do without it. This night, though gloomy, has been lit with the light of creation itself. Today is a day sealed by my Maker. For not since the beginning of my days have my eyes seen a day with such brightness as this. Today, when I feel that my life has hit rock bottom, my Maker has given me the raw material to rebuild it. And how shall I rebuild it? Because in the past, I have stumbled in ignorance and fallen badly wounded by the killer of opportunity, indecision. The answer is simple. I will be solicitous to ask for help from those who have succeeded. For today I realize that the humble find grace before their Maker, how much more so before those around them. For everyone who asks for help acknowledges the expertise of his helper. Moreover, I will let myself be guided by the wisdom present in these scrolls, so that I may listen attentively to the voice of God, while its Maker time works skillfully on my soul, using the bruises produced by my mistakes and constant training. Today I cast off forever haste, laziness, and fear. Today, I give total freedom to time, as the artificer sent by the Most High to work upon my soul. For my part, I will wait patiently and silently, while he masterfully completes his work, so that the teachings I have received and the words written on the scrolls may fulfill the task for which they were intended. I will memorize them continually to bring their wisdom to remembrance. In the meantime, I will train, study, and strive to seek the counsel of those who have achieved success. By this great hope which has come upon me, I will persist in my training. I will resist the hand of time, and I will not desist until I lay hold of that for which also was laid hold of by my Maker. I am the greatest creation of all time, for my Maker, together with the artificer of time, waited patiently until this moment to plant me on this earth. I am not by chance in this inheritance. I was cast in my mother's womb, and by the breath of my Maker I received my share among the living. Therefore, I am to pay the price of the purpose for which I was grasped. And what is this price? I am to increase my abilities, paying the amount necessary to obtain them from the three sources of wisdom and instruction. I will begin my journey now, for there is no greater distance between me and my life project than the distance I have not yet begun to travel. In this way, I will readily encounter obstacles carefully designed to improve my skill. I will be grateful for every obstacle that appears on my path, for it will be a teacher, a booster, and a stepping stone to enhance my talents and challenge my limitations. I will remember the clay masters I have seen in the clay pits, who compose an image by placing their hands while the clay spins in their hands. In due course, the waste and unusable coating is discarded, and lo and behold, the true image is revealed. My Maker has made nothing imperfect, so my job in this world is to remove all that is left over, so that my true image comes forth. And what is this left over? It is my mistaken and limiting beliefs, which like unusable debris are to be removed by the hands of the Maker. I am the greatest creation of my Maker, and my purpose is immense in a great way. He has appointed 3 creditors to whom I am to pay a price to obtain my desire. The first of all is time, to whom I am to pay the just amount of patience, while I pay regularly my other 2 creditors. The second is training, to whom I must pay the price of effort and constancy. Finally, I will find the master of failure, to whom I must pay the price of learning by putting a magnifying glass on my mistakes, improving and polishing my skills. If, for any reason, I fail in any of these creditors, my Maker will not lay his hands on me to reveal his master image. His purpose in me will not be fulfilled. And why will this happen? The answer is elementary. If I shall be carried away by haste, not fulfilling my obligations in time, neither training nor failure will be able to work its art in me. Moreover, if my Maker should lay his precious hand upon me, will I contend with him? Will the clay say to him who shapes it, "What are you doing?" Or perhaps in its haste the clay will object, "Why so long delay to finish what you have begun? Where is your skill? You don't know how to work." On the other hand, if one pays patience to time and the master of failure but dispenses with training, how can one improve and polish one's skills? Or how can one disprove the limits of what one is capable of achieving? Likewise, what is to be written for me to achieve my purpose has already been communicated by my predecessors on the scroll. However, The only scroll that cannot assist me in achieving my desire is the one that I refrain from scrutinizing, interpreting, and studying. I will absorb every scroll that comes into my hands, for it has been the legacy that my ancestors have bequeathed to me as their great fortune. Finally, if I were to pay the price for time and training, but forget the master of failure, I would become too cautious to achieve anything too great. I would be a mere coward afraid to try again. I would give up the child in me, using my creativity to make excuses, exchanging the curiosity and imagination that make me a child of God for the timid spirit of failure, doubt, and fear. I will be like my designer. I will aim for the stars, so that I push my limits. I am the creative image of my maker, and as such, I determine to show my true form, paying the price that is due for a life of purpose and fulfillment. I will choose the vocation of the apprentice. Therefore, I will master the fundamentals which the Creator has supplied me, never dispensing with time, training, and error. I will act without haste, fear, or anxiety, and only thus will I be presented at once with the next opportunity to object to the impossible. For the same hand that made the universe without effort formed and endowed me to manifest its limitless power. Therefore, I will always renew my strength, focusing all my energy on my vocation as an apprentice. Furthermore, I will nurture unconditional gratitude to my Maker to fortify my faith in Him. In this way, I will also renew my strength to manifest my purpose to the world. I will shed my old nature, to become the speech that my Maker wrote in His own handwriting, for men to hear His wisdom. I am that scroll upon which my Maker is to write a message to all men. I will wait silently and patiently until He engraves in my flesh His precious message. Therefore, my lips will not have to utter a word, for those who are to know me will see in me engraved the message of their Maker, and like me, they will find the truth. They will come out of their prisons. They will show their true image. I am a scroll written by God. I will wait patiently until He withdraws His pen from my flesh. I am the scroll upon which my Maker shall write His wisdom and instruction. I will wait and not relent, so that the world will know His counsel.
After finishing his lecture, Kadmiel paused for a moment to observe his image in front of the mirror. As he looked directly into his eyes, his very face surprised him, for his skin looked different, or at least different to his eyes. Also, his look and bearing spoke of someone who had been renewed. It was as if a veil had fallen from his eyes that prevented him from seeing clearly. His worries and fears had fallen silent in the face of that heartfelt dissertation. Why had it taken him so long to decipher his true calling? He pondered to see if there was anything else within the scroll that might catch his attention. Then suddenly, there stood out in his sight a small verse that read,
"If I had near him some eloquent hand-picked mediator, let it announce to man his duty."
For a moment, Kadmiel, immersed in this little verse, was a great source of wonder and of curiosity, for he felt that a mystery lay in those words. That was surely why the old man Asal had guarded the parchment so jealously for so many years. However, the verse did not seem to have a direct connection with the other scrolls, so he decided to keep all these things in his heart. Then he rested his back on his cot gently, let his body slump and hunched over, and drifted deeper into the day until he fell asleep. Kadmiel woke up again, but this time he was drenched in sweat, and his bed was not unmade as usual. He looked around to see if he was alone in his room, or if after that day something strange had happened. After a quick glance out of his window, Kadmiel could see the dullness of the night, and that dawn was a long way off. He jumped to his feet and eagerly hurried to stow the parchment in his grandfather's chest. He immediately went to the river that flowed in front of his house to take a bath and returned to his room. There he returned to the chest and reached into it. He then took out the first scroll that had been handed to him and gently unrolled it. Excitement and hope had invaded his heart, for in his holdings he already had 3 scrolls, and with them the hope that he was gradually drawing nearer to fulfilling his grandfather's design. In full determination, Kadmiel became so engrossed in his reading of the 3 scrolls that the light of dawn reached him as a signal that he must interrupt his reading. He then hastened on his way to the fields where he would meet his 2 mentors. Every achievement is a matter of perseverance and effort. Kadmiel rode swiftly with his head held high so that he could clearly see the horizon. Such was Kadmiel's enthusiasm that as he galloped, he felt the excitement preside over his journey to the fields. For this reason, it was not long before he caught sight of his uncle Raphael and the elder Asael coming out of their tents to begin their day's work. As he came across the place where the steeds were saddled, he alighted from his steed and walked nimbly in front of him until he left the place. The sunlight shone on the place as if it were noon, and the encounter that Kadmiel had anticipated was immediately presented to him as he saw Asael waiting outside his tent to greet him. The old man approached the young man and asked,
"You look different, boy. You look as if something new has happened to you. Have you come with the full readiness to start afresh?"
Kadmiel stared at him and replied,
Of course I have, Asael. I have decided never again to overestimate what can be achieved in a short time, and never again to underestimate what can be achieved with perseverance and effort over the time required. I will persist, I will endure, and I will not give up until my training is complete. I am determined to give myself unreservedly to make the most of this time which has been bestowed upon me by my Maker and by you.
Kadmiel said this with so much verve that Asael stood in utter amazement and silence. The silence overwhelmed the old man, and he was overcome with a kind of bewilderment at hearing such a response from the boy's mouth. Impressed, the old man stared at the boy and said,
"I have pondered your words, and realizing that your understanding has been enlightened by the scrolls, I will change the position you are to take during your training."
Kadmiel, surprised, said,
I thought I would start from the lowest rung in the fields.
The old man interrupted and said,
"Certainly the environments will either drive you or stifle you during your training and personal development. So you have to start in the company of foremen. You will not start as a worker."
Foreman?
interrupted Kadmiel.
"If so, you must start as soon as possible. Gird yourself and come with me to the field, and I will show you to those who are to teach you the activities pertaining to your trade."
And so it was that Kadmiel began his training in the fields once again. Early each morning he would rise before dawn to meditate on the 3 scrolls, so that he could extract some distinction that might lead him more quickly to his task. Daily, after an arduous day of learning, he would return home in the evening and meditate in bed on every detail contained in the scrolls that had been entrusted to him. Days turned into months, and months into years. Then various rumors began to spread throughout the region where the sites were located. Some said,
Kadmiel, the boy who lacked determination, is now a man diligent in his work. What has happened to him?
Others said,
"It seems that there's nothing left of that hesitant and indecisive man. Kadmiel has become a constant and hard-working man in everything he does."
Among the workers and their subordinates, they commented,
Kadmiel is a man who shows kindness no matter how hard the challenges or difficult the times. He is also a man who does not disdain advice, not taking precedence between positions of greater or lesser importance, but is always ready to listen.
Also among the foremen, they said,
Kadmiel is a man who is consistent and loyal to his job. He devotes the necessary time to his work, but he never allows it to go beyond the boundaries of his study space.
All these rumors began to reach the ears of Asael and Raphael, and so it came to pass that Kadmiel devoted 5 years of his life to training to become a field manager in the company of his uncle and his partner Asael. The elder Asael, accompanied only by his partner Raphael, watched the seasons come and go, while Kadmiel grew into a trustworthy man, capable of performing any task in the field. Unnoticed, Kadmiel had served as a foreman, an exploration leader, and a field manager. Yet his dedication to apprenticeship remained consistent and loyal to his vocation as an apprentice. Then, one day, Asael and Raphael decided that it was time to summon Kadmiel to hand over the position of site manager to him, or for him to decide to take another direction in his vocation as an apprentice. And so it came to pass that Asael sent for him to meet with him to learn of the young man's intentions. Then Kadmiel came before Asael and Raphael, and Asael said to Kadmiel,
"We have been informed of your good performance in the fields, and of your good conduct with your subordinates. Also, the exploration tasks assigned to you have turned out better than expected. On the other hand, we would like you to listen to the comments about the good reputation we have heard throughout the region," and they carefully recounted every word they had heard about your performance.
Kadmiel listened attentively with a smile that conveyed satisfaction. Then Asael, concluding his speech, asked Kadmiel,
My son, we want to hear from your lips. What did you learn during these 5 years? And what was the reason for your great change?
Kadmiel nodded his head and stood up and said,
I have learned that there are no limits or special people. Only those who have discovered their true vocation in life have to work with a sense of direction, and as a consequence will achieve whatever they set their minds to. This was the main cause of my failure, for I had not discovered my vocation in life, and as a result, I was disloyal and inconsistent in everything I undertook. However, by discovering my vocation, I was soon able to identify my dreams in life. As a result, today I'm able to exercise loyalty and consistency. On the other hand, I understood that I must pay the price that is due to time, not allowing the haste and eagerness that often push us to achieve a result. Only in this way, I was able to give myself completely to my training and my skills improved without even noticing it. Moreover, the training led me to continually challenge my limits, so I was able to give free rein to mistakes, and it was easier for me to take the risk necessary to step into the unknown. I did not allow fear to bind me and interrupt my progress. Finally, I learned to be kind to everyone, respecting the advice and warnings of those who worked with me and could see the problems face to face.
Then Asael, seeing the boy's wisdom, said to him,
Very well, Kadmiel. I believe you have fully completed your training, and for this reason we would like to offer you the position of Chief of Fields.
Chief of Fields?
Interrupted Kadmiel.
That's right, my boy. However, I suggest that you refrain from being dazzled by positions and hierarchy. For as I told you, vocation is more important than profession, and I see you have learned a great deal from holding every available position in the field. Looking at you, I can sense that your dream is to pursue your vocation as an apprentice, so you will soon want to take a new path to fulfill your dreams and complete your quest.
The boy nodded and said,
Yes, Asael. I believe my time in the field has been fruitful, but I would like to embark on a new journey to continue my quest.
Then Asael looked at him steadily and said,
I agree with you. If you do not pursue your dream and your vocation and go into the unknown, you will pay dearly for your decision. For cowardice is also not going beyond your limits to pursue your dreams. Those who do this may feel some relief at not embarking on a new journey. However, their peace of mind will sooner or later turn to regret, for their dreams will die and fester within them. Remember that those who refrain from paying the price due for their dreams in the present, seeking their peace of mind, must live with remorse that they did not turn against the fear which compelled them not to begin again. As long as you are an apprentice, you will find that the fruit of learning and constant growth will be new opportunities. Thanks to your vocation as an apprentice, preparation will be your lot, for you will often find yourself in the right time and place to seize them all. Keep moving forward, Kadmiel. Do not measure the distance you travel in stages traveled, but instead measure your distance traveled, taking into account each step you take.
The old man paused and then continued.
Kadmiel, I would like to ask a question about the scrolls.
Yes, sir,
said Kadmiel.
After having meditated at length on their words, what part of them have you not been able to decipher?
Kadmiel organized his thoughts before speaking, and after a moment he replied,
Indeed, within my grandfather's scroll there is a saying that puzzles me. However, inside the last scroll you gave me, there is a little saying that has filled me with curiosity.
Raphael glanced sideways at Asael and was astonished, for he had never seen such an expression on the old man's face before. Then Raphael took the floor for a moment and asked Kadmiel,
And what are these verses?
Kadmiel, after a short pause, said,
On the first scroll, the saying that stuns me is, How sad is the state I am in? Who will free me from the bondage of this mortal nature? And on the scroll Asael gave me, the saying that fills me with curiosity is this: If he had near him some eloquent mediator most chosen, who would announce to man his duty. Both writers in their wisdom have longed for a higher power as their only hope. He must be our doer, or so I think.
His answer seemed good to Asael and Raphael, and Asael said to Raphael,
Can we keep him any longer, if his ways are before his maker?
And Asael said to Kadmiel,
Now I understand that you must set out on your journey without delay, for you have an important mission to accomplish. Where do you intend to go?
And Kadmiel answered and said,
I will go to the land of Sagnit. for I have heard that they are engaged in cattle breeding and agriculture there.
It is a beautiful place. To reach it, you will have to cross the desert of Bethzalel. Therefore you must prepare sufficient provisions for the journey, lest you faint from hunger or thirst on the way, for being an inhospitable place, you will be all alone.
Asahel said in a loud and energetic voice. The old man paused and then continued.
I will now give you a chest in which to store all the things of great value that you are to take on your journey. But first, there are certain conditions which you must accept. In the chest you will find a bag containing 1,000 copper coins. This sum will be enough to buy provisions, so that you will have just enough to reach your destination. Take it as payment for your years of work at the mine. Also inside the chest you will find a scroll written in my handwriting, to be given to an old man named Eleazar, whom you will find at the entrance to the city of Sagnit. He will help you find the place you seek, and introduce you to men you can trust in order to accomplish your task. As you see, I have not forgotten your vocation as an apprentice. In this letter I place my reputation in your hands, for I have every confidence in your abilities, and I know you will not let me down.
Kadmiel felt his heart ache, and looking out into the fields, he saw at once all the laborers and foremen who had been his companions in the struggle all these years. While such thoughts were stirring in his mind and heart, Asahel continued,
Leave these fields at once, that you may not regret your new journey, and go home and take with you the scrolls and all that is of value to you. Don't forget to embrace your loved ones, and go to the marketplace to buy the provisions that will supply you along the way. In Sagnit you will find unlimited opportunities to apply what you have learned so far from the 3 sources of wisdom. If you combine the wisdom of each scroll you come into possession of with the experience you gain in your chosen craft under the guidance of a mentor, your success as an apprentice is assured. My first condition, then, is that you promise me that you will not disregard the wisdom contained in the scrolls that come into your hands, however simple they may be. Do we have an agreement?
Yes, sir.
If you do not despise the wisdom that comes into your hands, thoughts will surely come to you that you have never experienced before. Thus you will find it convenient and necessary to your vocation as an apprentice to prefer one craft over another. My second condition is that you consult Eleazar before you choose who is to be your mentor in this craft. You must not deviate in the slightest from this condition. Do we have a deal?
That's right, yes, sir.
Now I must ask of you the most important condition of all. Once you clearly discover your grandfather's design and find the best path to your maker, you must share all your experience and the wisdom contained in the scrolls. Remember that wisdom is simple and capable of moving its possessors from darkness to light. Therefore you must become a door that leads many to wisdom. Only then will their prisons be destroyed and you will accomplish your task. Remember that only a true apprentice will find the only way for his vocation to crystallize by teaching others by his example. Will you promise to fulfill this third condition?
I will do so.
Seeing him standing there about to set out on his journey, the old man was moved, and letting out a sigh, said these words,
I hope to see you soon. Take the chest and go. I bid you farewell with great affection, declaring that you will be prosperous in your journey, and all will be well with you. Truly, I know that you will succeed in your vocation as an apprentice.
Kadmiel could not suppress his sadness and sobbed as he bade farewell to his uncle and Asahel. Then Asahel handed him the chest, and Kadmiel carried it out the door of the tent. Outside, he stopped, put the chest on the ground, and turned to Asahel and his uncle, saying,
Soon you will hear from me. I promise to write to them as soon as I reach Sagnit.
The elder Asahel and his uncle Raphael smiled, and each raised his arm in farewell. To be continued.